All right, guess what? Yeah, I'm on the right camera. Ham Radio 2.0. Welcome back to the Technician class part 2. We started last night and went for about 2.5 hours. We're going to go for about that same amount of time tonight. My name is Jason. I'm KC5HWB. I'm going to bring on Chris here in just a minute. So this is a technician class for people who are interested in getting their very first amateur radio license. It is given to us by the Hurst Amateur Radio Club in Texas, about halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth, in a small town out there called Hurst, Hurst. You can find their website at w5hrc.org, w5 Hotel Romeo Charlie.org. If you are in the North Texas area, Dallas, Fort Worth, somewhere outside of there, if you're within an hour's driving distance, I recommend that you guys come to a Saturday meeting sometime. They have Saturday meetings every Saturday, every week, when the lockdown's not happening. Not right now, but generally speaking, they have Saturday meetings every week. We've been doing Zoom sessions for our Saturday meetings and for our monthly club meetings for the last 2 months. I'm a member of the club, obviously, and it's a really good time. So great club out there. There's a lot of really good clubs in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and this is one of the ones I'm a member of. It's not the only one out there, but it is a very active one, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So we had 210 some odd people watching last night, and it was that was really good. A lot of really good questions in the chat. I did not have anyone email me with any questions, so maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. We have Frank in the chat tonight moderating. We have Good Game Ham Radio and Outdoors in the chat tonight moderating. And we have Noel, KF5SLK, in the chat tonight moderating. So, and I'll be in there when Chris is presenting. I'll be in the chat myself. So you guys feel free to ask questions. If you missed something last night, go back and watch it. The YouTube did process the video, and it posted publicly around 10 p.m. Central Standard Time last night, so it's been up there all day, and I've been responding to comments on it today. So people have been watching it today, and it's been a really good time. So we've got that going for us. Let me look here. To address a few questions that we had before last night, there is a general class this is the technician training, so this is the very first license. The general is the second license. The extra is the third license. There is a general class already posted on this channel. You can go watch those. They were posted last November. They're in 6 parts, and you can go watch those and replay them and rewind them and fast forward and whatever you want to. So once you pass your technician, the general's already up there for you. We'll make an announcement later on to maybe do a live stream on the general class. Frank, let me know if you have my email address sign-up list URL, because I forgot to put that up here last night. It's part of our normal standard live streaming URLs that we share. So questions at livefromthehamshack.tv. If you ask a question tonight, or if you're watching this after the fact, you want to ask a question, you can send an email to that address. Frank and Noel, I put a link to that address in the Google document, so you can just copy paste it. I forgot to do that yesterday. There's the general YouTube link that Frank just posted in the super chat. And so once you pass technician, general's right there, so it's all good. You can make a super chat donation by clicking on the $ underneath the that was somebody just subscribed. You can make a super chat donation by clicking on the $ underneath the chat box. If you make a super chat donation of any monetary value, you can do $1 or anything more than that. You can your question will get moved to the top of the list. That's just the way that YouTube does it. You do not have to donate. Donations do go to funding the channel and making it grow further. They are appreciated, but they are not required. This class is free. We are not charging for it. It will be free on YouTube after this session is done. So let me bring on Chris here real quick. I've got that screen there and there. There you are. What's up, man?
Oh, not much. Happy to be here.
Cool. Good. Thanks for presenting again tonight. Got a lot of really good comments yesterday, both during the stream and after the stream on the just the regular YouTube comments. People really enjoyed it. Several people at the end of the stream last night commented about how detailed it was. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream yesterday, people were concerned that it was just going to be like, hey, read the question, read the answer, read the question, read the answer. We don't do that around here. There's nothing. If you want to learn the
Too
stuff,
easy.
if you want to learn the material that way, there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't need a class to do that. You can read the book yourself and do that. This is going to be a very detailed, very explanatory. That's not a word.
There you go.
A lot of explanation goes on in the material covered tonight. Chris, thank you for being here. And I'm sure you have a slide at the beginning presentation that thanks Mike again. If you don't, you might mention that. Just an FYI. So I'll let you take it. You ready to go?
I am.
Okay. It is yours, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be back tonight for round two. Again, I want to thank all the moderators and everybody that's helping out in the chats. Also, want to thank Mike and 5YM for actually writing this material. He did a very good job, and we've used it many times. So we'll go ahead and get started. I hope that y'all have done probably at least one practice test just to see what it's like. Get your feet wet. You may have, if you did, you probably got about 30% right, maybe 40% right, which is pretty much right on par. So, again, this is brought to you by the Hearst Amateur Radio Club. This is session 2. If you missed the first one, you want to watch it first because this does build on that. So we're going to start by talking about transmitters and receivers. Basically, a transceiver, when you combine a transmitter and a receiver into the same box, you get a transceiver because it does both parts. The one on the left is a mobile. It's a 10-meter mobile, looks like, and then the other one is a handheld. Both of them do the same thing as far as function. Some of the older transmitters will have some fine-tuning knobs on it. So one of the knobs, the large knob on this screen, on this radio, is going to be your tuning knob, your main tuning knob. And then some radios will have another knob called RIT, R-I-T, receiver incremental tuning. It's like a fine-tuning knob. Is what that is. So you will use the large knob to get on the frequency, and as radios age, they will kind of start to drift off of the actual frequency that is shown on your screen or on your panel, and so that's what the RIT button or the RIT knob will do. Is it will just kind of help you fine tune, and that way you're lined up exactly with what the person you're trying to talk to, the same frequency that they're on. Just about every radio, if not all, have some sort of a squelch control on them. The squelch control is a transceiver. On a transceiver is designed to basically quiet the noise when there's no signal being received. Back in my early days when I was little, and my first handheld radio was just one of those little toy handhelds that when you turned it on, it just constantly had that static noise. Didn't have a squelch built in. That's what the squelch is here for. It's for, you could turn that knob up to basically silence the radio. That way it's not always making noise, and you're not always hearing some sort of static. On some radios, the squelch is set using a knob like this one. Some of the newer ones that have more advanced functions, they may not have had a place to put another knob, so it will be a menu function. But it should still have it regardless somewhere, whether it's a physical button or a menu option. This is known as carrier squelch. And like I said, it's the sole purpose of this is basically just to quiet the radio. So this is a pretty common radio. Linco is one maker out there. When you want to actually select a frequency that you want. There's two modes that you can operate in. You can either operate in memory mode, which we talked about yesterday, or you can operate in, basically it's manual dial mode. It's called VFO, which is a variable frequency oscillator. Every radio is going to have it somewhere in there. You can use, in this case, if you want to enter in a frequency, you can use the keypad just like you would a telephone. It's got a DTMF touchpad on the microphone itself, or you can use the VFO knob. Both of them will do the same thing. One is quicker than the other, but they will do the same thing. So VFO is basically manual mode, no memory. It allows you to manually dial in the frequency that you want to go to. So yesterday you heard me say something about Q signals, like QSO or QSY, QRM. Q signals are they're shorthand abbreviations used to speed up communications. They were developed for Morse code, but even though they were developed for Morse code to shorten things, we still use them in voice all the time. It's not uncommon to hear somebody say, okay, I'm going to QSY to another frequency, or I'm at the QTH, which is house. I'm getting some QRM, which is man-made interference. So there's a long list. You don't have to know every one of them. There are a couple of them that you will need to know, just so you're familiar with them, because you will hear them on the radio. Both of these there's a couple of them. So QRM is man-made interference, such as another station operating either knowingly or unknowingly too close to you, and they're kind of bleeding in on your signal. Could be an accident, hopefully not on purpose. But then there's also QRN, which is nature sounds, lightning or storms or anything like that can cause some sort of interference. So QRM as well as QRN are a couple more that you'll want to store in the back of your mind. So there are different ways to call out on the radio. The most common is calling CQ. This is generally done on HF, where you do sideband and AM operations. So CQ means basically calling any station, calling anybody. I want to talk to somebody. CQ, CQ, CQ. It's an invitation for any operator listening on that frequency to respond. Anybody hear me? You can call back to me and I'll respond. So when you answer a CQ, you first say the other station's call sign, the actual person who was calling CQ, followed by your call sign. That way they hear somebody calling them and then identifying who it is that's actually being called. So CQ is very, very common. There are some times that we don't use CQ. We don't use CQ on a repeater. I have heard it. Nobody's going to get on to you if you call CQ on a repeater. But the first thing you want to do when you want to call CQ, if you want to talk to somebody and you're on, say, a 2 meter or Simplex, or you're on 6 meters, you want to do some sort of a distant contact, you want to listen first. Always listen. So listen for anyone else using that frequency. I would give it at least 10 seconds, maybe more. Then ask if the frequency's in use. If you want to be very, very sure, ask if the frequency's in use. Make sure that you're on the proper band. That should be one of your first steps there. So as with all things human, we like to make a contest. We like to make a contest out of or a sport out of anything. So same thing in ham radio. We like to contest. It's a very popular ham activity, basically in making contacts with as many stations as possible during a time period. So it's usually on HF bands. You might find it on 6 meters. You might find it on a VHF, but it's generally on HF, and it's almost always almost always some sort of a contest going on. The goal is to work as many different countries or as many different states or grid or whatever the terms are. You want to try and make as many contacts as you possibly can by exchanging the minimum information required: call sign, location, and then Q signal received and sent, or your basically your receive and your send signal strength. One of the modes that you will operate will be simplex. Basically means you are transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. In this case, they're on the 2-meter call frequency, 146.52. Both of them are on there. They transmit and they receive on the same. So simplex is basically direct communication. That's what it is. You're not using a repeater. You're not going through anything else. You're going directly from one radio to the next. A repeater is a radio transceiver that receives a signal on one frequency and then simultaneously retransmit on another frequency. Repeaters are very common. You will find here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I would say they wouldn't be surprised if there were hundreds. Usually at a high location, the higher the better when it comes to a repeater. They generally transmit at a high power. The sole purpose is to extend the range of a handheld and mobile radio. That way, you can talk into a repeater. They're generally very sensitive. You can talk into the repeater, and then without any effort on your part, your signal will be transmitted at a much higher power. The Hearst Club that we're putting on this right now, this presentation right now, one of our repeaters is on top of a water tower in the middle of Hearst, and its radiated power is about 125 watts. So you can transmit into it at about 5 watts or less, and then it will retransmit at about 125 or whatever the repeater owner has it set to. Generally, it's FM on UHF or VHF, or there are some newer digital technologies that may be operating also. So FM is going to be the mode of choice. That's what you're going to want to memorize. But now, kind of moving into the future, there's some digital technologies also. So the main difference between the input and output frequency is known as the offset. Every repeater will have an offset. There is a standard number. There is a standard offset frequency on 2 meters, which is what they are operating on right now. That offset is, let me go back. That offset is 600 kilohertz, and then that is the standard across the board for repeaters, 2-meter repeaters, and then on 70 centimeters, that offset is actually 5 megahertz. So it's a little bit wider gap there. So you talk into the repeater, it receives on one frequency, and then immediately begins to transmit on a different frequency. So Hilda is talking in on the repeater input. The repeater is retransmitting that on the output of 147.100 at a much higher power. So input and then output. So when you transmit and receive on 2 different frequencies, this is called duplex. Duplexing is what this is. You don't have to duplex through a repeater. You can do that. Say if you have 2 handheld radios, you can duplex using those going basically direct. It's transmitting and receiving on 2 different frequencies. This is an aerial picture of the antenna on top of the water tower in Hearst. This is at TCC College. It's way up on top. It's about 170 feet, I think it is. So the antenna is up on top, and then there's some coax cable that goes all the way down to the shack, or the actual building that the repeater is in. And this repeater, its input is 147.7, and its output is 147.10. So you can see there's a 600 kilohertz offset there. The offset frequency, that is the difference between the input and the output frequency. And like I said, this is standard across the board in the United States. 600 kilohertz on 2 meters, and then 5 megahertz on 7 centimeters. Now, this can be either positive or negative. It just depends on the repeater. Most modern radios from the big providers will generally automatically calculate that offset for you, so you don't have to memorize it. Some of the lesser expensive Chinese radios, you'll have to know all of that information to put it in there. So there are a few repeaters that don't use offsets that are standard. They're said to have non-standard frequency offsets. Frequency splits is another name for them. When you run into this, they're generally considered what's called non-coordinated or backyard repeaters. Somebody wanted a repeater, and so they just set it up. And you can do that, but there are some things you have to look out for that we'll discuss later. You will usually set your radio up to listen on the repeater's output frequency. And then you set your radio to transmit on a frequency equal to the offset, plus or minus from the output frequency. When you put this into your radio will automatically shift when you press the push to talk. It will automatically either shift up or down depending on what the repeater's input frequency is. It will automatically either shift up or down by whatever the radio, if it's been programmed to automatically know that, or you've put it in there. In this example, the Hurst Racy's repeater has an output frequency of 147.1. So that's what the repeater actually transmits on. That's where you're going to listen. That's, if you have a scanner, that's the frequency you're going to put in. That's the output. The offset is a positive in this particular spectrum of the band. It's a positive offset. So it's going to be a 600 kilohertz higher. So 147.1 plus 0.6 is 147.7. 147.7 is the repeater input frequency. That's what your radio, when you actually key up your transmitter, it's going to shift up to 147.7 and transmit there. And then the repeater will retransmit on its output, 147.1. So just some general operating guidelines. What's the first thing you should do before you use a repeater? And that's going to be listen. Listen. How can you tell if a repeater is already in use? Listen. I can tell you, count many times that I've been engaged in a conversation, and somebody will just flip over and immediately start talking and interrupt what we were having a QSO there. If you just listen, you'll hear somebody, and if you're still not sure, you can ask if the frequency's in use. So listen is going to be your best friend. Area repeater frequencies are determined by recognized regional coordinators, not the FCC. The FCC does not want, they make the rules. They don't want to have to involve themselves in coordinating repeaters. They just don't have the resources yet. So they give that responsibility to regional coordinators. An example of that here in Dallas-Fort Worth is, or in quite a bit of Texas, is the Texas VHF Society. They do the surveys, they do the assignments, they keep all that information on hand in order to keep repeaters from overlapping each other. This reduces interference between repeaters, and it makes sure that we properly use the most efficient use of the available frequencies within the band plan. So this is a band plan right here. This one is one of many that are out there. ICOM puts this one out. They're a radio manufacturer. It's a voluntary list or voluntary agreement for use of the frequency spectrum. So if you look 2 meters, if you let's go down CW, it shows you exactly where the CW is generally working. Single sideband, FM, where in the band that has been allocated. So this goes all 6 all the way up to 1240. That actually all goes all the way down to 160 meters. It's all planned out, so we can use the spectrum the most efficiently. You can download a band plan from, I believe, from ICOM. The ARRL has a very good one that you can download for free. The W5YI, and I know probably numerous other ham organizations out there have band plans that you can download for free. Couldn't hurt to have it on your wall next to your radio, just to be sure. So because there are a limited number of input-output frequencies, we generally call these pairs. So you'll hear a repeater owner say, yeah, I got a new pair. That's the input-output frequencies. They may share the same input frequencies as another repeater somewhere else in the state. Each repeater does have a coverage area. Some footprints are larger than others, but both repeaters, because they are programmed for the same frequencies, can hear the other one. So we need a way to access only one repeater at a time. So that way, when if we're right in the middle of these two, and we key a transmitter, we're not actually keying both of them at the same time. So you get your pair, your offset, and then we also program what's called a CTCSS, continuous tone coded squelch system, or PL tone if that's a Motorola trademark. So CTCSS or PL tone is what we basically plug in. The repeater can hear this tone when you start transmitting. You cannot hear it. It's a frequency that's too low, but this tone is required in order to activate the transmitter. If the repeater hears your signal, but you don't have this subaudible tone, it will recognize that and say, not interested, go away, basically is what it will do. So repeaters having overlapping coverage areas will be set up with different CTSS tones. Otherwise, you will activate both of them at the same exact time. The repeater will only retransmit a signal that has its matching CTCSS tone, PL tone, and then it will reject all others. This is generally a good thing to have because let's just say there's a lightning storm around. If you don't have a tone set, every time the lightning will strike, your radio will activate. And so this is one of the things that prevents just general noise from activating your radio or a repeater radio. In order to use a repeater, you're going to need to know some information. When you look online for repeater information, you're going to get the output frequency, you're going to get the offset, and you're going to get the access tone. The access tone is the CTCSS or PL tone. Those are the three things that you're going to need. And then you'll have to calculate, or your radio will calculate for you, the frequency that will either shift up or down on your radio. So you're going to need to know the output, the offset, and the access tone. If you want to join an existing conversation on a repeater, just wait for a break between transmissions. Most repeaters have some sort of a courtesy tone, so when you let off a radio, it will give you a beep or some sort of noise letting you know that the conversation or the transmission is over, and you can hear that. It's, like I said, it's usually a beep or some sort of noise to where you can clearly understand what it is. Then give your call sign. Just give your call sign out there, KD5HOI. Somebody will generally acknowledge you and invite you to join in. We love to have big QSO parties on the air, and so it's not uncommon, have multiple people join and fall off during a given time. So you just give your call sign and wait to be acknowledged. Other radio services will use the word break. In amateur radio, do not use the word break unless you have an emergency. That is reserved for emergency use only, period. If you say break and you don't have an emergency, that's basically It could be equivalent to like calling 911 when you don't have an emergency and hanging up. So it's considered serious business when if somebody says break. So some etiquette, repeater etiquette. Speak in plain English, or whatever language the repeaters generally operate in. Listen to see if the frequency is in use before you call. That way you don't just kind of barge in and interrupt a QSO going on. If in doubt, ask if the frequency is in use, and then use your call. So is the frequency in use, KD5HLY? That's what I would say. Don't call CQ. You can just say KD5HLY listening. You're just giving that information out there. If it's saying, hey, I want to use the repeater, I want to talk to somebody, you don't have to call CQ on a repeater. Don't use break unless it is an emergency. To interrupt, give your call sign between the other stations. That way somebody can hear you, and then acknowledge the station interrupting and turn it over to them as soon as possible. It could be an emergency. Have you ever heard the squelch tale? Don't be trigger happy. So when you actually begin transmitting, it takes just a second for the receiver to pick up your signal or receive your signal, recognize that it is a valid signal, and then key the transmitter. So there is a little bit of a delay. If you will key your transmitter and just give it a second, that's more than enough time. Don't be trigger happy. We actually have a name for that, and it's we call it quick keying, and it's because you began talking at the instant that you pushed your push to talk button, and the first part of your conversation was cut off. Wonder if you can hit the repeater. A common practice, and it is not legal, and it drives me up the wall, is kerchunking. Give your call sign. If you're wondering if you can make it to the repeater, just give your call sign. Say KD5HLY testing. Always identify. You're supposed to identify at every 10 minutes or at the end of your conversation. Run on the lowest necessary power to operate. You don't have to try and call on a very low power HT when everyone tells you it's unreadable. Increase your power if you're just not making it in. Speak clearly. Don't key and unkey your rig the instant that you start and stop speaking. It does take some time for the system to come up and down. Unfortunately, there are some jammers out there who like to get on there and cause problems on the radio. Just ignore them. If you hear some sort of information that might be able to lead to who it is, take notes. The whole reason that they jam is for the attention, to get on there and make a clown of themselves. So just ignore them. Generally, they will go away. So repeaters do come in different flavors. The traditional one is voice phone repeater. This is an FM modulated signal, just a standard FM handheld radio. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. It's just it's just an FM radio. Then we have digital repeaters. That includes packet radio, D-Star, Fusion, which is a digital voice, DMR, digital voice, D-Star is digital voice. Packet radio can be some sort of an APRS, which is a position reporting system. You can pass data through some repeaters. And then there's amateur television repeaters. This retransmits fast scan amateur television, which is basically like the television that you might have in your house, except it operates on the amateur radio bands. Some repeaters are linked in a network. Those do exist. So when you actually key up one repeater, it will key up multiple repeaters. If you're operating in that situation, when you key a repeater, you'll want to give it longer than the normal time, because it will take time to actually activate the remote repeaters that it's connected to. So we're going to take a little review here. Yesterday, I would read the question, give you about 5 seconds to come up with the answer. I'm going to do the same thing here. So, which type of modulation is the most commonly used for VHF and UHF voice repeaters? So this was going to be FM. That is the most common at this time. Digital is kind of growing, but FM is still pretty much dominant. What brief statement is transmitted in place of a CQ to indicate that you are listening on a repeater? You just say your call sign. I would get on there and I'd just say KD5HLY listening or mobile or portable or anything like that. Just let anybody know that I'm actually out there listening and ready to talk. Which of the following describes the common meaning of the term repeater offset? It's going to be C, the difference between the repeater's transmit and receive frequencies. What is a common repeater offset on the 70 centimeter band? We did cover this just a minute ago about the 70 centimeter band. That is going to be A, plus or minus 5 megahertz. What is the purpose of the squelch control on a transceiver? It's going to be to mute the receiver output noise when there's no signal being received. That way you don't go crazy. What is the term used to describe the subaudible tone transmitted with normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver? It's going to be CTCSS, also known as a PL tone. Questions or anything you can ask in the chat. Happy to take those. We're actually, I thought we were at a break, but we're not quite there just yet. So one of the major things that we do in amateur radio is why one of the reasons that we exist is because of emergency communications. This can be operating as a storm spotter or a backup communications for public service or health care, really anything that what might need some sort of a backup or additional information from some sort of other source. An emergency is a situation which possesses immediate risk to health, life, or property. That is what they will define that as, immediate risk to health, life, or property. Most emergencies require urgent intervention to prevent a worsening of the situation. So emergency communications take precedence over all other communications, period. If you were to ask that to the FCC, they would not argue with you. They would say emergency has priority, always. So make an emergency distress call on amateur radio by, if you're on Morse code, you can say SOS. This is the International Radio Distress Call when communicating in Morse code. And then Mayday is the International Radio Distress Call when communicating by voice. So SOS or Mayday immediately will get the priority over anything else. Using SOS or Mayday indicates you are in distress. It is a distress call. So communication concerns a person's well-being sent out into or out of a disaster area are called health and welfare traffic. These messages are important, but are not emergency traffic. So that is a very common thing that you will see during like a hurricane net, and we'll talk about nets shortly. To interrupt a conversation on a repeater for an emergency or distress call, just wait for a pause between the transmissions. If you try to break in while somebody's talking, you won't be heard. The person who was actually doing the talking will no longer be heard. So you have to wait between transmissions before you can actually break in. You say priority, emergency, or break, or mayday, whatever it is to convey that you have an emergency. You give your call sign. So break, KD5HLY. Give your call sign, and when a ham radio operator hears that, they know that everything stops, and you now have the priority on the frequency. The other stations will give you immediate access to the repeater and will assist you as appropriate. Like we said earlier, do not use the word break to interrupt a conversation for any reason except to indicate an emergency. If you're in public service, that might be a difficult thing because you use the word break to interrupt, say, multiple bits of information. Here it is emergency use only. If you hear an emergency distress call on the radio, you should immediately stop your conversation. Allow the emergency caller access to the frequency, find out who they were or who they are, what's going on, what they need. Assist the emergency as appropriate. Take down the information accurately. The 911 dispatchers would find it very interesting to say, irritating to say, okay, where are we going? Well, I don't really know. Somebody just called me. So you want to make sure you take down the information as accurately as you can. Call the authorities as appropriate. Usually just call 911. You don't have to call a fire station directly or police directly. Just call 911. During an emergency, you may use any means of communication at your disposal to communicate. Any means available, any radio, any frequency, anywhere. However, if you have a cell phone available or you have a handheld available, and you're trying to get help for, say, a police officer that's down, and you have a radio available, use your radio or use your phone. Don't get on another radio unless that is the only option, because you will have to give account for it. You probably won't get in trouble if it's an emergency situation, but if you have another radio available and you use that, or you don't use that, you use a police radio, they're going to question why you didn't just use what you had and got on their frequency. So use any radio, any frequency anywhere, as long as no other means is available. Emergency communications is taken seriously, so making a false emergency call can result in, and usually will result in, revocation of your license. Making a false claim can get you a monetary fine, and they're usually very expensive, like $10,000 or more. And just like if you were to make a fake 911 call, or something like that, where basically you're saying that you have an emergency and you really don't, filing a false report, you're probably going to go to jail. So same thing here. Emergency communications are taken very seriously. So don't give false reports. The FCC may declare certain frequencies as restricted to emergency communications only. This is not uncommon especially during hurricane season. So they will define special conditions and requirements. They will set aside certain frequencies for the use of like a hurricane net or some sort of emergency communications on amateur radio, where that way information can still flow back and forth, because oftentimes during hurricanes, public service systems may go down or internet may go down. That's not uncommon. So hurricane net frequencies for communications into and out of a stricken area will be set aside, and unless you are working in that for that need, you're not to stay, or you're not to operate in there. We do have different kinds of emergency operations. We have ARES, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. This is a private. This is for sort of supporting private agencies like the Red Cross, Salvation Army, National Weather Service, or something along that line. RACES is a different one. There are usually more restrictive. A RACES mode is activated by a local state or government. Each city can, at their discretion, activate a RACES net, and then it is restricted to only those who are qualified and certified as RACES members for that area. This is used for emergency management or civil defense. Oftentimes, you will get a weather radio or weather event coming through, and a city will activate, let's just say, Skywarn under RACES. So only since it was activated by a government agency, let's just say Fort Worth activates RACES. Only RACES qualified, trained, and recognized people, hams, can actually operate on a RACES net. Where Aries, there are no restrictions, but you do want to observe what kind of information the net control is trying to get. So when providing communications in support of public agencies under RACES or Aries, the FCC rules do apply still. So that's not a way to get out of following the rules. So 2 organizations. One is just general private activation, and then the other is federal government or emergency management, civil defense activated. So the net control station is the middleman when it comes to a net. The net control station directs and coordinates communications of all other stations participating in the net. They're like the traffic cop. They're telling you when to go, when to stop, when to relay, when to hold, basically everything. You transmit only when they tell you to transmit. So if you call in and say that you're available, now you are waiting on them to call you back and say, okay, whatever information you have, you can now transmit. The net control station is in charge. All communications are directed by the net control station, NCS. Don't transmit unless directed or unless you have an emergency. So again, if you have an emergency, you will take priority even on a net. So if you can call and say emergency, priority, break, whatever it is to convey that you have some sort of emergency, and now you have priority on the radio. Do not transmit personal information about victims. The HIPAA does still apply if there's some sort of a, let's say a tornado comes through town and you say Billy's got a broken leg and cut on his head. Well, you have just identified that person over the air for anybody who's listening. You need to use some sort of non-voice mode, such as packet or Morse code, or some other means to where you're not releasing personally identifiable information over the air for anybody to hear. That can get you in trouble. So third-party traffic. Amateur communications by or under the supervision of the control operator at an amateur station to another amateur station at the request of others. So here, Hilda and Henry are having a conversation, and he's passing information and says, Hilda, your mother needs you to stop by her house on your way home. Perfectly fine. There is nothing at all wrong with that. Or the shelter and headquarters 1, the incident commander wants to be informed when the Red Cross truck arrives. So you're passing third-party traffic. You are the control station, and you are passing that third-party traffic. That is perfectly fine. And as you notice down there, those are going to be tactical call signs. Third-party traffic is also going to include passing what we call radiograms. So it's basically, it's kind of like the old-fashioned telegram. So you're receiving a message exactly as written or spoken or received. So it's all written down and given to a radio operator who will then relay that to whomever into the traffic network. So this is an example of of sending a radiogram. Like I said, a radiogram is basically it's a form that you fill out. It's limited to 25 words. You write that information down, and you send an information from one radio operator to another, who then can relay that to another. Really, any number of relays, and then the receiving station will receive that and can call Aunt Patty and tell her that everybody's good and she was glad to hear from you. This is a radiogram right here. So this is a document where you fill out the preamble information up at the top. Generally, that will be relayed to, or you will give that information to the person who's going to be sending the information. Give just basic information: where is it going, where it started, time, date. The checkbox right there, that is the way that you can verify that your message is sent correct. So if you say, I was happy to see you today, 7 letters. I was happy to see you today. Yeah, 7 letters. Your checksum or your checkbox up there would have 7. That way, when you're done, or the radio operator is done, they can say check of 7. And if the receiving station only got 6, then they would know something was lost in transmission and to send it again. That way, it's keeps the integrity of the message. It must contain the name of the person originating the message, because it does actually go into a network of ham operators, and that network can go all across the country, all across the world, depending on what the destination is. So we'll have a quick review here. Some questions again. Which of the following is a characteristic of good emergency traffic handling? Answer is going to be A, passing messages exactly as received. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class? Answer is D. A is very tempting, but the actual answer is D. So yes, but only if in necessary situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. What is meant by the term check in reference to a formal traffic message? That's going to be the basically the word count of the message. That is going to be the number of words will be put up into that box in order to verify that if the message has 7 words, 7 words were received. When do the FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station? Answer is going to be D. Never. They always apply. They will always apply. Put your questions into the chat, and we can answer some of those as we go. And we're going to take a short break here for just a few minutes. I'm going to get a drink, and then we'll pick back up in about 5 minutes or so.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, Chris, I'm going to switch off to me real quick. And go back over here. Okay, good. Thanks, man. Yeah, go ahead and take a break. I've got you off. You're not showing on the camera right now. Got some really good discussion going on in the chat. We will talk about so the term break was brought up a bunch of the chat, and if you've ever listened to, it's kind of different on repeaters and VHF UHF than it is on HF. A lot of times people think break is like synonymous to CB and 11 meters, and it is. It's used a lot over there, but most of the time, if you are listening to a net on a repeater or on DMR, Fusion, whatever, they will say at the beginning of the net when they're reading the preamble, they'll say, any emergency traffic that is needed, please start with break and proceed with your traffic. So it's kind of like a precursor to that. So, Ham Radio Crash Course is in the house tonight. Glad of you to show up, Josh. I'll give you a status there, bro. No problem with that. Yeah. So I don't know why I say right. It's more of a priority than emergency. It can be an emergency, but it can be like priority traffic. So I don't, it's kind of used differently in different areas. Again, the information we're presenting tonight is taken directly from the current question pool. That does not mean it's 100% accurate. Every now and then you find a question in the question pool, and they update the question pool every 4 years. Every now and then you find a question that's like, I don't think that's 100% accurate. But, however, think of it this way. This is the information you need to pass the test. Okay? You're going to do a lot more learning after you get your license and once you get on the radio and once you start operating on repeaters, VHF, UHF, HF especially, you get upgraded to general, you start learning some CW maybe. You're going to learn a lot more information by being on the radio and actually being on the air and actually using the tools that we have at our disposal than you will just by taking a test, taking a 35 question test. So 35 questions for tech, 35 questions for general. I think it's 50 questions for extra. So these are this curriculum is taken directly from the current question pool. So yeah, some of it might be a little bit off, but this is the information you need to pass the test. So that is good. Matt Quince is in the house. Good deal. So you guys smash that like. We got about 100 people watching right now and only 39 likes. If you give a thumbs up on the YouTube video, if you're enjoying it, really appreciate that. It does help out with the YouTube algorithm. So I'm gonna give Ham Radio Crash Course a mod status here before he stops crying about it. Add moderator. There you go, Josh. All right. Dude, I'm just teasing you. You know that. Anyway, we're all good there. So, when communicating with emergency personnel, being descriptive is a good thing. Helps locate victim. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Steve Good Game's in the house. Good Game, Ham Radio, and Outdoors. Been really good with answering questions, moderating the chat tonight. Yes. Oh, it's Smoking Ape is in the house. Look at that. Josh wants to know if we're doing a Zoom party after this, the after party. Yes. Set that up. It's freaking Friday night, man. Set up a Zoom and email us, man. Let's do it. Yeah, and make sure you copy Frank on it. Put it in the content creators chat that we have. Ham Radio TV was in the chat earlier. Jason, he's still out there. Ham Radio TV was in the chat earlier. We need to get Ham Radio TV access to the content creators channel on Discord. So we have a private room that all of us YouTubers get into and talk about how to YouTube. It's very fun. So it's all about promoting amateur radio. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, Ham Radio TV is in the house. So we need to get you in the chat, bro. And the content creators on the HRCC Discord if you're not already there. So, yeah. Greg Goddard, 2E0LXC. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the DX. Good deal. Very good. Good deal. Yeah, we're getting people connected tonight, man. That's what ham radio is about, getting people connected. Yeah. And Frank just put a link to the Discord chat, to my Discord chat. There's a lot of Discord chats out there for ham radio, guys. The link that Frank just put in the chat is to my Discord. Perfectly willing to answer questions 24/7 in that chat. We got a couple of guys who are overseas in that chat. One guy from South Africa, Ted, he was in the YouTube chat last night. He is overseas in South Africa, and he's in the Discord chat talking about DX all the time. Really good dude. Jay Jara asked, when is the general class? So, Frank, if you want to repost the link for the general class. The general class has been posted on my channel since November. It's the current question pool. It's the same club, the Hearst Amateur Radio Club out of North Texas, that put on a general class last November. I recorded it. I posted it. It's in 6 parts on my channel in a playlist on YouTube, and you can go watch it right now, anytime you want to. So you can, that's there. Let's see. Wally Gator 18. Passed my tech last week. Thank you, Glarg. Remote testing rocks. Good deal. Oh, there's... Hey, Carrie. Nobody can see on YouTube because I'm on myself right now. But, yeah, good deal. So, KD9PGK. Kilo Delta 9. Papa Golf Kilo. Congrats on the licensing, man. Glad to have you on board. Join the Discord. Let us know if you have any questions. Frank just posted the playlist to the general classes on this channel. So those are up there now. Good deal there. Chris, you about ready? Oh, there you are. You put your... I was talking to you. You didn't have your headset on.
Just a second here.
You about ready?
Let's see. Make sure all my settings are proper.
That's cool. So we had some discussion. I put in the Google Docs about using break. Some people were talking about using it on HF. Some people talked about using it on VHF repeaters and whatnot. So there was some confusion on that. And somebody said that you said that it was used for an emergency only, and I didn't catch that. So I think there was some question on when the proper use of that is. But that was the most talked about thing in the last hour. So.
Yeah, test 1, 2. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, man. It's all yours. Take it away.
Okay, so the break thing, that as far as the book is concerned and the test is concerned, break is for emergency use only. That's what the FCC says.
Yeah, and I explained that, sometimes the question pool might have a little bit of either discrepancies or perhaps just kind of miswording in it, but this is what you need to know for the test. So while there might be some stuff that's kind of like, well, that's not really worded correctly. This is what you need to know for the test, so just think of it that way. Go ahead, Chris. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, so there are many areas of amateur radio that you can get involved with. One of them that we're going to talk about now is propagation. This is basically the study of how radio waves travel from one point to another. How they get from your transmitter to the destination. There's mainly 3. There's actually one more that we may cover in a little bit. The first one is line of sight. That's basically, you see it, the radio wave goes directly to you. FM is generally line of sight, and that's why whenever it comes to antennas on VHF and you're using FM, the higher the better. Then there's also ground wave propagation. This is where the radio wave follows the curve of the Earth just a little bit, and then there's skywave propagation, and we're going to go over each one of those. So line of sight propagation is when a radio signal travels directly from one antenna to another. Like it says, line of sight. Your cutoff point is going to be the horizon, maybe just a little bit past the horizon, but that is where that cutoff is going to be. It's going to be that horizon. Like I said, this is line of sight, point to point, directly. The higher the transmitting or receiving antenna is, the greater the line of sight propagation distance becomes. That's why you will oftentimes, if you're driving, say, through downtown Dallas, and you look at the Green Building, one of the taller buildings in Dallas, the entire top of it is just lined with antennas, because essentially the higher the antenna, the further your range will be. They are effectively blocked by the curvature of the Earth at the radio horizon. radio horizon is just a little bit further than your visual horizon. So that's going to be the cutoff there. Radio wave travel along the ground, bending slightly to follow the curvature of the Earth for some distance is called ground wave. So ground wave actually travel a little farther than the radio horizon. If you could picture the horizon from a radio signal, it's actually it makes the Earth look a little less curved. It goes a little bit further than line of sight will. Actually, it can go quite a bit further depending on whatever's going on. So that's how ground waves travel. They actually travel along the ground and go past the line of sight, the radio horizon there. They go further than that. And then propagation, the last one is skywave. And this is a very common practice in HF operations, not so much VHF and UHF because of the radio waves generally will go right through the ionosphere. But on HF, bouncing signals off of the ionosphere is very common practice. And it is one of the most effective ways to actually make a long distance contact is by ionospheric skywave propagation. So, looking at the Earth, looking at the ionosphere, during the day, the energy from the sun bombards the gases in the ionosphere, causing ions to form. They separate into 4 layers, and you can see here the D, E, F1, and F2 layers. Radio waves are refracted back towards the Earth. So when a radio frequency or an RF signal will go up, bounce off of the ionosphere, and then back towards Earth. We're able to bounce that radio signal off the ionosphere and back to Earth. We call that skywave. The skip zone is kind of a side effect of skywave. So the skip zone is the area that is too far for ground wave, but too close for skywave. It's kind of like a dead zone in there. You might be able to hear, say, the person. You might be able to hear the person down here at the remote station, but you might not be able to hear the person who's actually transmitting at the other end, because that signal is literally bouncing off and going right over you and overshooting you. When it hits the ionosphere, the polarization of the original signal is randomized. So it is very important that if you're going to try and make an HF contact, you need to start by listening, because there may be a couple of people there who are actually having a conversation, but you may not be able to hear one, and so you'll want to listen and then ask if the frequency is in use. And oftentimes, you might be surprised. You might hear somebody come back and say it is, or yeah, it's in use, or just something letting you know that you're in the skip zone, and you can determine that you're in the skip zone and you can't hear one of the other stations. You're only hearing one. Not all radio waves are refracted by ionosphere. The frequency does make a difference. So the very low frequency, VLF, which is not a range that we're going to discuss here, they actually just get absorbed up in the ionosphere. UHF and VHF signals usually will pass through. There might be some that bounce back down, but generally they go right through. Their wavelengths are too small. Medium frequency and HF signals oftentimes will reflect, so they'll go up and they will bounce right back down. There is no exact frequency. That frequency, that maximum usable frequency, changes hour to hour, day by day, minute by minute, even second by second, because you may be talking to somebody and all of a sudden they just fade away, and you're done. That's you're done with that QSO. So that propagation does change, and it can change very quickly. So the D layer, located about 30 to 60 miles above Earth's surface, the ionization only lasts while exposed to the sun's rays. It's good for 10-meter propagation during the daytime. A little bit higher, the E layer is located 60 to 70 miles above Earth. Just like the D region, it lasts only during the sun, while the sun is up, and ionizing and charging that layer. The E layer communication is only possible during the day, and there's a reason why. The F layer ranges from about 100 to 310 miles above the Earth. F region splits into two parts, F1 and F2. Using the F2 region with two-way radio contacts, you can easily make a contact 2,500 miles away without any problem. The F2 region is responsible for almost all long-distance communications on frequencies from 1.8 to 3 on our HF frequencies. Now, I did say that the D and the E are only possible to use during the day, and the reason is at night when the sun is not charging the ionosphere, all of those layers collapse into just the F layer. So during the day, it's broken up: D, E, F1, F2. As soon as the sun goes down, those collapse all into one. And that's one of the reasons that when the sun goes down, right after the sun goes down, you can get amazing long-range communications at night on the shortwave bands. So at night, everything collapses down into a single F layer, and it's usually the highest layer up there. And so you can get, just amazing DX contacts. Now, tropospheric ducting it's kind of a phenomenon. It's really, it's a really interesting thing happens, and I'll give you an example of it here in just a sec. It's a temperature inversion that causes a layer of warm air to be sandwiched in between a layer of cooler air. I said that exactly. The cool air on the outside and warmer on the inside. I said exactly opposite. So UHF signals and VHF signals will get trapped up in there, and it will function just like a fiber optic cable. That light will get in there in a fiber optic cable, and it will go for a long distance. Same thing with tropospheric ducting. A radio signal will get into the troposphere, get in there, and it will basically bounce back and forth for long distances. And the example I can give of that is the Hearst Club has the 147.1 repeater here in Hearst in North Texas. About 600 miles away in, I believe it's Brownsville. I can't remember exactly where it is. Maybe it's Corpus Christi. That one of their repeaters is on exactly the same frequency, and whenever the atmosphere is just right, the temperatures are just right, we will hear that repeater down in Corpus or Brownsville or wherever it is, 600 miles away. We will hear that as if we're sitting right here or sitting right next to that repeater. So it's a really interesting thing. You really can't predict it, but when it happens, you get amazing distant contacts on VHF and UHF. So it's really kind of a neat thing that you experience.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
That repeater is in Goldwaite, Texas, and it's next to Brownwood. That's what you're thinking of.
Brownwood. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still, that's a long way away.
It is. It's like a 3.5 hour drive, and we go down to Brownwood for a family reunion every year. And yeah, I've driving around Dallas-Fort Worth, I've heard that repeater on our frequency before. It's really wild. So, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, Goldwaite, Texas is where you're at.
That's perfectly fine. Let's see. Something else that some will attempt is meteor scatter. So, there is a date in August. It's actually my wife's birthday, where every year there is a meteor shower that comes through, and you can bounce signals off of that greenish trail that comes off of a meteor as it's entering the atmosphere. You kind of get a little bit of a warbly sound, pretty interesting. But it's basically you're bouncing signals off of a meteor and they are reflecting back. 6 meters is very effective for this, for meteor scatter. Excuse me. Let's see here. Space and satellites. So some satellites have a circular orbit where they maintain a relatively constant distance from the Earth. We talked about the other day, we talked a little bit about satellites. A satellite sends telemetry reports on the condition of its systems, like batteries and transmitters and all the information it needs. And then the ground controllers, whoever's controlling it, sends telecommands to modify whatever the satellite's operations. The International Space Station is considered a low Earth orbit amateur radio satellite station. You can contact them, and then sometimes they do have events where if they get that rare downtime, they can get on the radio and you can make a contact with them. And oftentimes, if you make a contact with them, they will send you a QSL card confirming your contact. And so it's really neat. It's a really fast thing. You have to be on your game and you have to be ready for it. But once you lock into the frequencies and you're able to track it, it's a really neat thing. We have some guys in the club that satellites is something that they enjoy doing. So communications with satellites use line of sight propagation. It is line of sight up to space. Amateur satellites, they're basically repeaters. You can talk around the world. There's either there's two kind of repeaters up there. They're either immediate, retransmit just like a standard repeater, or a store and forward. So you send a message to it, and then when it gets to wherever it is you wanted it to go, it will then transmit the message down. So any amateur with a technician license or higher is allowed to transmit on the uplink frequency. The uplink frequency is the frequency where you're sending to the repeater. So any amateur radio operator holding a technician class license or higher can talk to a satellite and then listen on its downlink frequency. Downlink is typically on the 2 meter band, 146 megahertz, somewhere in that area. It's well documented out there. So if that's something that you want to do, you just have to get those frequencies, and then you can track those satellites. So you'll see on the satellite information a U stroke V as its subband, and that'll let you know that it's got an uplink on UHF and a downlink on VHF. And they do that for its technical reasons why they have to do that, but that's set aside for satellites in a specific subband of each of those bands. So the satellite, as it passes by, there's a chance it may not be nice and a nice smooth pass. It may be tumbling, it may be spinning, it could be doing any number of things. But rotation of the satellite and its antennas will cause what's called spin fading, where the signal will quickly fade in and out, and you can hear it, but it'll fade in and out as it is spinning around. One of the things that you have to account for if you're going to try and operate satellites is you do have to take into account Doppler effect. Just as a motorcycle or a train passes you and the sound goes from a higher pitch down to a lower pitch, you do have to take into account your frequency is going to be a little higher, and as it passes over, you're going to have to adjust your VFO down a little bit as it passes by. It's not a lot, but you do have to, in order to stay in contact with, you do have to make that adjustment as it's flying over you. So at an altitude of 50 miles or greater, the FCC considers that station to be a space station. So anything, it could be a satellite or the ISS or some other space station, as long as it's 50 miles or higher, it's considered a space station. So, and as I said, the Doppler effect, it's going to increase as it's coming to you. It's going to increase as it flies over you. It's going to begin to decrease. So you just have to kind of track that on your VFO knob. The way you track satellites is by using a computer program. You can use a web page. You can use a program to determine when an amateur station or amateur satellite will fly over you. These are called Keplerian elements, or KEPs, as it's listed here. Basically, what it does is it just tracks the movement of satellites. Every satellite it'll track. It'll say you can put in your grid square, and it will tell you exactly when it's going to be at in your area, what angle, azimuth, line of sight azimuth. It'll give you all that information in order for you to do the calculation and figure out what angles and everything you need to keep your antenna so you can make that contact. So some questions. What mode is responsible for allowing over-the-horizon VHF and UHF communications to ranges of approximately 300 miles on a regular basis? Answer is tropospheric scatter. It makes it sound like it's just all the time. It can be a rare thing. It's not something that you can plan for. It will come and go just depending on the weather. Which part of the atmosphere enables the propagation of radio signals around the world? That's going to be the ionosphere. Most of the first two kind of deal more with weather-related things. The ionosphere is going to be like that mirror in the sky, essentially. What can be used to determine the time period during which an amateur satellite or space station can be accessed? It's going to be in a satellite tracking program. We also call that Keplerian elements. Why are direct, not via repeater, UHF signals rarely heard from stations outside your local coverage area? I don't know if we covered this, but good information. UHF signals are not reflected by the ionosphere. They're easily absorbed by buildings and things, but they also go right through the ionosphere. What do the initials LEO tell you about an amateur satellite? Answer is going to be that it is a low Earth orbit. So it's a lot closer than the geostationaries, which are quite a few thousand miles away. These are generally under 1,000 miles. What causes spin fading when referring to satellite signals? It's going to be the rotation of the satellite and its antennas. And they generally do not have just one antenna. They will have antennas on the top and bottom. They'll have kind of 45-degree angles off that way. There's complete coverage regardless of where it is, and it will spin, and you'll hear that fading in and out while you're making that contact. Which of the following are inputs to a satellite tracking program? This is going to be B, the Keplerian elements. This is a list of, it's constantly updating as the orbits of the satellites move. These are the information that program is able to use to be able to track that satellite. Why do VHF and UHF radio signals usually travel somewhat farther than the visual line of sight distance between two stations? The Earth seems just a little less curved to a radio wave than it does to light. When using a directional antenna, how might your station be able to access a distant repeater if buildings or obstructions are blocking the direct line of sight? Answer is going to be to try and find a path that reflects the signals to the repeater. That is literally if you have to bounce a signal off of a building, that is something that you can do. A is not correct, even though it didn't fade out. The long path, that's not going to be very effective on VHF and UHF because that's the long way around the world. Rather than going from A to B, you're going all the way around the world. That's an HF thing. That's not so much a VHF thing. Questions that might have come up. Looking at the chat real quick before we jump in to the next section. Okay. All right, we're going to go into digital. There's a lot of information here. This is a really fun thing to do, and right now with the HF bands kind of having a difficult time due to low sunspots. Sometimes digital is your only choice. So, digital radio communications is basically a way of taking information and coding it into some sort of a digital signal, turning a radio carrier on and off in a predetermined pattern. That sounds an awful lot like Morse code. On, off. That's what digital is. So you can kind of say that Morse code was the original digital. Shifting the frequency or phase of a radio carrier back and forth in a predetermined pattern is another way you can create a digital signal. So radio signals, radio digital communications, they come in several types or modes, such as packet, which is sort of like a LAN network at your house, wireless network at your house. Then you got MFSK, which is multi-frequency shift key, I think it is. I may be wrong there. And then PSK31, that's to name a few. That is literally just a few of the many different kinds that are out there. So CW, the original digital. CW is shorthand for continuous wave. You communicate using CW by switching a continuous carrier wave off and on and long and short pulses. Combination of these pulses called codes represent letters, numbers, and punctuation. It's been around for 125 years, maybe a little longer. The code used for ham radio communications is the International Morse code. Just we don't have a special Morse code. We just use the International Morse code that's been around. So you can send CW using a few different ways. You can use your keyboard. There are programs out there that will allow you to send your keyboard, and it is becoming more and more popular. You can use an electronic keyer, which lets you go very fast, and then there is the traditional straight key. Those are three different methods that you can use in order to send and receive Morse code. So some of the digital communication types we're going to list here. Basically, using a computer and a radio transceiver, and you're ready to go. CW, PSK31, packet, MFSK, WSJT suite, that includes JT65 and Whisper, I believe it is. Slow scan TV, FT8, IEEE 802.11 wireless, and there are still even more digital modes. What we're going to do, we're not going to go over every single one of them, but your computer is going to be part of your station if you want to do digital. What you see here, this is, I believe, I can't see it. I believe this is PSK31 in that example on the screen itself. It's going to generate and decode digital signals It will send and receive Morse code, log contacts and contact information. Some programs have all this built into it. Sometimes you can control, using certain software, you can control the radio transceiver from your computer. You just click and it will change the information on the radio. Most of the time, you can use the computer sound card or some sort of software that can support numerous digital communications. There are quite a few of them out there. Basically, the whatever the computer says is sent to the sound card, and then an input on the radio itself, and then the radio to transmit it. You can use it to convert audio from the radio to digital form. So using a computer and amateur radio makes you a very powerful station. There's some really neat things going on in ham radio Wi-Fi. There is some technology out there called broadband hamnet or high-speed multimedia. The most common one is called Arden, ARDEN, and it's basically a high-speed amateur radio-based data network using commercial Wi-Fi gear with modified firmware. Some guy here in the mid cities, as well as going up north, and then quite a bit down south. There is a big ham radio Wi-Fi ARD network, and that connects North Texas up in the Denton area, which is about 25, 30 miles. Straight north. Maybe a little further, and it's just using direction-based Wi-Fi information, and it links up cities. And then once you have that internet link, you can set up, say, a backup phone system or Wi-Fi. If for some reason the Wi-Fi in the whole metroplex goes down, you can use whatever link is available in the Wi-Fi network. So it's really neat. It's a fun thing to do. We have the Hearst Club has a DMR repeater that all of its Wi-Fi all of its network connections are going through an Arden network. So it's some of our guys have the equipment at their house up on a tower. On the water tower, there's a node, and they just point it together. And there's probably a 5 or 6 mile link there using Wi-Fi. And it's just something that we can do because it happens to use our frequencies. So it's really neat. I encourage you to look into that. I'm glad that this is something that they're putting into more current versions of the question pool, because it is taking off, and there are many implementations out there that are really neat and very powerful. I mean, it's really neat. PSK31 is it's extremely simple to set up and use. PSK means phase shift keying, and it's a low rate data transmission mode. Works well in noisy conditions, and basically what it is you will enter in a letter. The software will send that letter over the radio, so you could watch people as they're typing on the radio wherever they are. You can watch them typing. If they make a mistake, you can see them backspace. It's very powerful. It can get through on a very noisy signal, and you can just use your sound card and some free software. FLDigi is one. Is what it's called. You can get that from SourceForge. It's a very powerful software, free and open source. You can use it with your sound card, or if you need something a little more powerful, you can get some sort of a sound card interface to interface with your transceiver. So I hope that you will give that a try, because once you make a contact, it's quite an accomplishment. It's really, really neat to do. Oh, let me go back. Also, PSK31. If you use an Android phone, there's an app on there called I believe it's called PSK Droid, and you can take your phone and set it on a radio that's receiving PSK, and you can see it print out on your phone. It's really neat. It is a cost. I don't know how much it costs, but that is something as simple as just taking your phone, setting it up there, and then you can watch the data come in from wherever. FT8 is a rather new-ish, hadn't been around very long. It's a digital communication mode ideal for making contact under weak signal conditions. It consists of data blocks that are sent and received in synchronized 15-second intervals. Your computer transmits, their computer transmits, yours, theirs, in 15-second intervals. You also use a sound card with this and some software. That's also, I believe, it's open source and on the internet that you can get using a simple sound card or some sort of interface connected to your radio. FT8 is kind of the new and going thing. I believe there's one that's going to be replacing it soon called FT4. But if you can't get out under anything because the bands are just they're just too noisy, you can try FT8 and very low power, and you can make very distant contacts. I mean, I have been told, I've never tried it, but I've heard 1 watt FT8 signal from Dallas, from the DFW airport to Japan. 1 watt is not uncommon. So it's a really neat weak signal mode. Packet radio is just like the easiest way to think about this is an old phone modem where you dialed up AOL, you hear your modem pick up the phone, dial its number, and then do all the beeps and everything that would go into it. That is a form of packet radio. We also do that in ham radio. It's a form of digital communications where the computer basically breaks up the message into chunks, hunks, or packets of information. It has built-in error detection, so if something is lost, the TNC or the modem basically can request that information again. It works just like a not only like a phone modem, but sort of like a router. You can think of that. Each packet has a checksum for error detection, a header with where the information is going. It has the ability to send up a repeat request if it missed something. So all of that is connected together, but your computer is connected to your radio using the TNC. Usually you have to have a TNC if you want to do packet. You don't use your sound card. So a TNC is a terminal node controller, and that is going to be your interface between the computer and the transceiver. And like I said, it acts as if it was one of those old dial-up modems. It keys up the transmitter and it sends that data, and it waits to listen, and so that's kind of the way that works. You've heard me mention APRS, which is position reporting. APRS, automatic position packet. It used to be position, now it's packet reporting system because they've kind of expanded out the ability or its capability of what it can do. It takes global positioning system, GPS information, translates it into an automatic packet of digital information, and then transmits that. And if you look on this map, so right here is Hearst. This is kind of where I'm at. I believe there is a digipeater. I don't know where it is anymore. There's digipeaters scattered around, and they're connected to the internet and connected to a radio. And so the radio will hear it, and then the software will relay that to the APRS network, and then it will put a little red dot there, and you can actually track where people are going. And this is all public, so if you are paranoid about Google tracking you, this is an extreme form of that. It's anybody can look this up and see exactly where you go. You can see some people following the interstates and where they're going. So this is really neat. I've done this before. You can also send text messages from one radio to the next. So that's something you should try. The equipment cost is coming down pretty rapidly. And so you ought to give it a try. It's really neat. So digital audio is it's an analog audio waveform. It's sliced up into segments and assigned a digital value. So if you look at the down here on the bottom, the audio analog to digital conversion, software to the radio, and then once the radio that receives it goes right back down to break that down, radio to software, digital to analog conversion, and then back to audio. That's basically what digital is. It's just broken up into chunks, assigned a value, transmitted, and then on the other end, it's decoded. We also have the ability to utilize the internet voice VoIP technologies to connect multiple repeaters. So there's some software out there called IRLP. Let's see. There's also Echolink, and then the newcomer on the street that's very powerful is, oh goodness, Jason, do you remember what it's called? You know what it's called? It'll come to me, but it's a very powerful system that connects your computer to the internet.
I was answering a question or in the chat. I didn't hear what you asked.
We have Echolink. We also have
All-Star.
IRLP. All-Star.
All-Star is what you're looking for.
I was going art. What is it? All-Star. That's kind of the newcomer on the street, but it's very powerful. The audio is very good, and so you would talk into the repeater. The repeater would translate that into an internet link, and then at the other end, you would tell that repeater who you wanted to connect to. You have a node number, so you would say, "I want to connect to 123.4." It goes out the internet, it connects to there, and now Cowboy can talk to looks like UPS man over here over the repeaters connected over the internet, and that is using VoIP, voice over internet, just like your phone would. IRP, Echolink, those are the two. They've been around for a long time, internet radio linking project. And then Echolink is software that you can install on your radio. You can install it on there, and then you can connect to repeaters. And so you can use your computers to talk to over the internet to another repeater. You don't even have to have a radio. So it's really neat. It's kind of fun. I've used it before. There's some good people from all over the world on those. A gateway is going to be the connection between the internet and the radio. Usually it's some sort of, say, like a laptop or a computer or something like that has software on it that basically it does the connection. It tells the links what to do. Each gateway has a node number, and it's always some sort of number. It's usually like a 4 to 6 digit number that way you can transmit on your radio. You can punch in 1, 2, 3, 4, and the software will link you to node 1, 2, 3, 4. Connect, make that link established, and then you can talk over the internet. This is a screenshot of some of the active nodes. This is you can see the node number here on the left, the call sign, where it is, province, country, frequency. This just gives you the information of how to make that connection. It's usually just, I want to connect to the first one. I key up my transmitter, node 1000. My node will connect to V7 RHS right there in Vancouver and make that link, and I can now talk to somebody over the internet and then through their repeater as we go back. We have a QSO back and forth. Pretty neat. One of the things that's out, the book here is called the Repeater Directory. That's something that the ARRL puts out every year. I believe they still put it out. They spend a lot of time basically updating all of the repeaters across the country for all different kinds of modes that you want to operate. They'll put all that in the book. They'll publish it, and then they'll start again. They will update everything, and then once they get that done, they'll put out the 2009, 2010, so on and so on. There are many options out there now. Like there's a website called Repeater Book. They have an app for iOS and Android that you get the same information. Usually, it's updated more frequently because it's actually user updated. So as something changes, I can log on to Repeater Book and I can update that information, and now that's updated for all information. So it's called Repeater Book. It's a free app. I would get that if you're interested in just seeing what's around you, because it does use GPS to pinpoint where you are, and then it shows you what's around within a specific area. A kind of a newcomer on the block. It's less than 10 years old. DMR. It's one of my favorite digital modes. Basically, it was developed. It was a standard. It is a standard developed by the European Telecommunication Standards Institute for commercial communications. Now, just like all other radio technologies, we can't leave it to be commercial only. We want it for ourselves too. So amateur radio operators have adopted this technology also. It uses what's called time multiplexing technique. TDMA is what it is what the actual acronym, time division multiple access. What this means is traditionally, if you use an FM repeater, and you key up the mic, your radio is constantly transmitting, never stops until you actually let off of the repeater, off of the push to talk. DMR, what it does is it breaks your voice into a digital packet and then transmits for a certain amount of time. It's very fast. It transmits, it stops. It transmits, it stops. It transmits, it stops, and it allows you to have more capacity on a repeater than just the traditional, where if you have two sets of people, one is talking, the other has to wait. Well, a DMR, you can have, because it's a pulse. You have a pulse. Another radio will transmit, then that won't stop it, and so it's a constant. It's a constant pulse of starting and stopping. Multiple people can talk at exactly the same time and never hear each other. This is something that you might hear about on Jason's channel a lot. It's like I said, it's fairly new. There are other standards out there. I don't believe that they're growing as fast as DMR, but digital voice is really neat. You can do a lot of different things with it. So it basically allows two digital signals to exist on a single channel without interference. One is transmitting on this at this time, the other is transmitting here. While this one is transmitting, this one is off. And so it's kind of like a step. And so they will never hear each other, even though you're talking at exactly the same time. It's a very, very efficient way to use radio. You get just more capacity at any given time. This is showing what I mean by the different the time pulses. We call them time slot 1, time slot 2, and you can see how they alternate back and forth, back and forth. So while time slot 1 is transmitting, time slot 2 is sitting patiently, and then they'll swap, back and forth until eventually the transmission stops. So that just allows more communications in a given channel at a given time. It allows more capacity. Each time slot carries a different conversation. If you're happy or not happy, if you're interested in learning more, I'll give you a website that Jason and I both actually maintain regarding DMR. We'll do that later on, and you can check it out if you're interested in learning that. This is the exact radio that I have right here. The way that digital communications work, they don't work like traditional FM. Digital will use a digital code. We'll call that a talk group, to basically connect users across repeaters. So here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we have different talk groups. We have North Texas wide. We have Texas statewide. Those are what we call talk groups. You can think of a talk group kind of like a traditional repeater. You get on there and you talk to whoever. That is one way to think about a talk group. So it's like a kind of, it's just a connection of it's like a chat room. There we go. It's like a chat room. There are hundreds of different channels depending on what your interests are. If you want to talk statewide, every state has their own state ID talk group, and then there's multiple different kind of talk groups, for local or worldwide or North America or US, or so there's any number. And this is something that digital kind of opens up. It allows you to be able to kind of make the world a smaller place, essentially, with using radio. It connects more people together. So you program the desired talk group ID numbers into your radio, and I'm going to see if I can. You may not be able to see this. Let's see here. Probably no. You're not able to see it. It gets washed out. Well, I have like different talk groups: North Texas wide, Texas statewide, and things like that. And you can put those in there, whatever you want, and then connect with people on those talk groups, or it's kind of like a chat room. Okay, so what does the abbreviation PSK mean? We went over that just a minute ago. It is one of the more common modes of digital communications, and it basically means phase shift keying. It's just a digital a method of making a digital signal. Which of the following is a digital communications mode? So we covered all three of those: packet radio, IEEE 802.11, and then JT65. Those are all three. They're very common modes. So which of the following would be connected between a transceiver and a computer and a packet radio station? This is a computer and a packet radio station. This is going to be a terminal node controller, a TNC. That's your digital modem connecting your computer to your transceiver. How is access to an IRLP node accomplished? This is going to be by using DTMF signals. This is going to be by using the number pad on your radio, on your HT or your handheld, your handy talkie. We call them HTs. Or on your mobile radio, you can use the number keys there, DTMF signals. How would you select a specific IRLP node when using a portable transceiver? I may have just given that to you, and the answer is D. You're going to use the keypad to transmit. So you're actually going to transmit, hold down the transmitter, and you're going to punch in the numbers, and the controller will connect you out. What does the term APRS mean? The answer is A, automatic packet reporting system. You may also see it as automatic position reporting system, because it used to be a position only system. Now it actually does packet. You can send a text message to somebody and it'll pop up on the radio. So now it is called automatic packet reporting system, but you may see it the other way sometimes. What is a talk group on a DMR digital repeater? It's going to be a way for groups of users to share a channel at different times without being heard by others on the channel. and people could be scattered all over the place. If it's say Texas statewide, it will be people from all over the state of Texas, and some that are out that have some sort of connection with Texas. So it's just it can be basically any repeater, but when you're on a certain talk group, they all connect on as one big repeater. Which of the following best describes broadband hamnet, or ARDN is another name, also referred to as high-speed multimedia network? It's going to be an amateur radio-based data network using commercial Wi-Fi gear with modified firmware. Works very well, and it's widely deployed all across the Metroplex here. Questions for the chat? I'm going to take just a second here, grab a quick drink, and then we'll continue.
Good deal, man. I'll take it over. Thanks. I'll watch for when you come back. Got that there. All right, good. Thank you. Everyone, take a break if you want to. Got some good questions going in the chat. Good Game Ham Radio and Outdoors was talking about his 25 kids. I had to point out that he's not Mormon. He's actually a school teacher. And good friend of mine, Steve, K5ATA out there. He teaches school, but he has a class for ham radio that he teaches ham radio to students. Really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. So he's gotten, I think he said he's at, well, I think the 25 number came for how many students he's got licensed over the last however long he's been doing it. So, really good deal there. Let's see. How can I watch this video again? Gu Yixin, I'm sure I'm saying your name wrong. This video, along with the first part last night, and along with the third part that will premiere tomorrow, will be replayable on YouTube. So as soon as this stream ends, it will post to YouTube, and you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want to. 25 kids and 3 staff members this year. Good deal. Yeah, thanks for being in the chat tonight, Steve. You've been a great help to moderate questions coming through. Good Game Ham Radio and Outdoors. He has a YouTube channel of his own. If you guys should be subscribed to me by now. Hopefully you are. And smash that thumbs up button. Looks like we got about 113 watching now, and 77 have hit the thumbs up button. But Good Game Ham Radio and Outdoors has a really good YouTube channel also. Really great. He's part of the YouTubers bunch, if you've never watched that. We get together about once a month and record a few videos. Good stuff there. K8MRD, Mike, is in the chat as well tonight. He does a lot of Parks on the Air activations videos. So if you don't know what Parks on the Air is, go subscribe to K8MRD. And he's done... I've done a few Parks on the Air activation videos myself on this channel, but he's done more than I have. So thanks for watching tonight. Good stuff. You guys put your questions in the chat. If anybody has a question, we can answer it real quick. Let's go back here to the... Someone asked... Someone asked about the frequency of the International Space Station. That was answered. If you missed that answer, here is the website that you can find the frequency of the International Space Station. And you can talk to if you have a technician license or higher. Let's see. Carl Fioca, hopefully I say your name right, says, am I going to be able to use all the cool digital stuff with my Mac, or am I going to be forced to buy a PC? Well, a Mac is a PC, because a PC is a personal computer. We had this discussion in the chat a minute ago. You mean a Windows box instead of a iOS or a Mac OS box is what you mean. But yeah, most of these Chinese DMR radios and the Yaesu radios and the D-Star radios, most of them do have Windows software for programming your radio. The Chirp program, which is a free piece of software which works for the analog radios, works on Windows, Mac, Raspberry Pi, Linux, and a bunch of different platforms. So it really depends on which radio you're talking about. A lot of the Chinese manufacturers that make DMR radios, they do not make a Mac OS compatible version of their software. Unfortunately, I wish they would. I really do. I'm not a Mac guy. I don't care for Macs, but I really wish that more manufacturers would make a variety of software for Windows, Linux, and Mac, all of them. I wish we weren't limited by that, but we are. Unfortunately, they didn't ask me before they before they wrote their software. Okay, Chris, I got you back in there now.
Okay.
We got back in the Zoom. So
panic mode there for just a second. My internet connection completely dropped out, and I was
I didn't even see it. I didn't have you on the screen on that time, so I didn't even notice. You're good. I have been hearing your kids scream in the background a little bit, and Carrie was in the chat earlier. Chris has a newborn. How old is he now?
16 months.
So I was thinking he was like 10 or 11 months. He's older than a year. Good.
Got an 18-year-old fixing to go off to college. Got a 10-year-old. He's actually 10 years old now, and 18 months, almost 18 months.
Man, your longevity is great, dude.
Surprise!
Awesome. All right, man. How much more do you think we have tonight?
We probably got about another 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're making really good time.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, good. Once again, guys, smash the like button, the thumbs up below the video if you don't mind. It does help out with the YouTube algorithm. And put your questions in the chat. Anything that you want to ask, there's 4 or 5 different moderators in there tonight that'll answer your questions for you, including myself. So, Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Excuse me. All right. So we're going to start getting into a little bit more technical information. We're gonna look inside some radios now and find out the basics. We're not going to go in depth. I'm not going to scare you off. We're going to go into the a high level, looking down at the pieces of a radio and how they essentially work. So we'll move on here. Let's go. Okay. There are different kinds of radios out there. You've heard me talk about different modes. That's like AM, sideband, SSB, FM, CW, digital. All of these combined together they're different modes. The computer, the radio functions a little bit different to make this work. You're probably familiar with FM and AM. You have those in your car. That's just two of many. So a radio a modern radio that you can buy will typically be what's called a multi-mode radio. Now, this beast that's on the radio on the screen right now, that is it's got a lot of knobs, so it's going to be very expensive. But if you can see my mouse, there's different modes. There's lower sideband, upper sideband, Morse code, AM, FM, RIDI, and then packet. And then over here, there's more. So there are, and then the small mobile one right here will also do quite a bit of what that will do, but you have to have some external hardware in order to make that work. Where this big monster radio right here has it all built in, the small mobile one, you would have to have something additional to interface to the radio rather than it having it all built in automatically. So CW and single sideband, that's SSB, capabilities make the multi-mode radio ideal for weak signal work. Now, weak signal is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically the radio being able to function and pull that either voice or digital information out of what would be considered a very weak signal. So that's going to be a common feature as you start looking on, in the catalogs and things like that, trying to decide what it is that you want to buy as your first radio, or as your first HF, down the road. Um, you'll start seeing all these different modes that they can do. So this is a photo, an aerial photo looking down at Northeast Tarrant County. This is I'm right here in this area, some right here. This is going to be Bedford. There's DFW Airport, the very edge of it, so you can kind of get a sense of where we are. This is 820. This is 183. So that I tell you that basically just so you can kind of get a feel for where you are in comparison to this, the next screens that we're going to be showing. So when you look at this is basically the same thing as this. You're looking down, and you can see all the you can see the houses, you can see the trees, you can see the roads. Same thing with this. You can look and you can see the capacitors, you can see the resistors, you can see the the little roads right there that the electrons. So that is going to be the equivalent. That is basically a simple radio transceiver right here, and that's one way to look at that. So this is the same thing as this, as far as looking down at everything. Then we're going to look at this is going to be a roadmap. So this has got the same information as that first map. You see all the roads, and you can see what makes everything there in a little bit more detail. That's what this is. This is a schematic. So a schematic shows you every single path, every single component, just like this does right here. You can see DFW up at the corner. You can see the roads, and you can see everything. That's how this is. It is a breakdown, a roadmap of that very same radio transceiver that we just saw. Then we also have a map like this. This is that same map, but it's showing the cities in a block form. Excuse me, in a block form. So there's Bedford, Colleyville, Hearst, North Richland Hills, so on and so on. Looking at that, now you can kind of piece together what each city is doing. And that's what this right here, this is called a block diagram. And this basically gives you an overview of what each individual piece of that transceiver does. So there's your power supply and your mixers and everything like that. That is the way. This just basically shows you the components and how they work together. This is called a functional block diagram. This block diagram describes the operation of a transmitter receiver in its most simple functional forms. So that is how we can basically break down that. This is going to be a block form right here. So this is going to be a CW transmitter block diagram. Your oscillator is going to be the part of the radio that actually generates your radio frequency signal. It generates that oscillating sine wave, radio wave. That's what actually does it. That is your oscillator, which then gets passed to your driver and your power amplifier, and that's all controlled. The actual transmission is controlled by your telegraph key. But that oscillator generates that signal where all the other information or signal is kind of added on in order to get that CW transmission. This is going to be an AM transmitter. So you still have your oscillator there doing the same thing as it did in that last one. But then you have your modulator. Your modulator is going to take your speech, and it's gonna convert that your analog speech that you're talking into that microphone. It's going to convert that into the electrical signals, which the modulator will then pass to the oscillator in order to overlay that new electrical signal onto the carrier. Again, your carrier is your actual RF signal. Your modulator puts in this case, the voice electrical signals onto that, which then passes it on down to the driver and the power amplifier. So you want to keep in. What you need to know here is what the modulator does. It takes your speech, your analog speech, and converts it. The microphone converts it into electrical signals, which then that modulator puts it onto the RF signal itself. So that is what it does. And this is an AM transmitter, so it's going to be amplitude modulated. So the louder you speak, the larger that modulated signal is going to be that goes onto that oscillator, into the oscillator to be put on a RF carrier. That can be confusing. I hope that made sense. If not, we can talk about it in just a few minutes. Because, like I said, this is kind of the a little bit more technical area, but it's once you get that basic function. Here's what the oscillator does. You can start piecing it together and understanding how a basic transmitter will work. So in a super heterodyne receiver, the mixer converts the incoming radio frequency signal to a lower intermediate frequency that can be handled easier by the following stages in the radio. So here comes your radio frequency signal A right there. It's going to come into the mixer. That's going to convert the radio signal from one frequency to another. Down here, you've got your variable local oscillator frequency. Then it's all going to come in and be mixed into converted into signal C right here. This is going to be your constant intermediate frequency. Then that's going to be passed to the next stage, next to the next stage, and the next stage. A super heterodyne receiver, a lot of people will say is really the best kind of is the best kind of receiver, and so we want to keep it signal. We want to keep it simple. So your radio frequency in, it is going to take that RF and the local oscillator. It's going to mix those together and spit out the constant intermediate frequency. That's what you need to know. All right. This is a single conversion, super heterodyne. Such big words. Super heterodyne radio. This is going to be an AM or a sideband receiver. Your product detector. So what this is going to do, your radio is going to be listening to everything. I mean, anything. It will receive every single thing that's out there. So your radio has to kind of isolate what you are asking it to listen to. So it's going to come in through the mixer, the intermediate frequency amplifier, your product detector right there. That's going to kind of isolate everything that it's receiving and make it into something that you can understand. It's all going to be passed through, and the radio is going to be doing. It's going to be stripping out what you don't want to hear. It's going to be converting it into the actual audio. Then it's going to go into the audio amplifier and out to your speakers. So your product detector is your important piece right here. This is what's going to kind of get rid of all that stuff that you're not interested in and present you with something that you can actually use. Some super heterodyne receivers have multiple IF stages. This will make it more selective to receive signals. So your selectivity, like I said, your radio is going to be receiving everything. It doesn't matter what frequency is, it's going to, the antenna will detect it, and it's going to come in the radio, and the radio has to do something with it in order for you to have usable information. So this is going to be where the selectivity of the radio comes. This is going to be where the radio it's gonna filter out all that stuff you don't want to hear, and the more selective a radio is, the finer that that receiver can kind of whittle down and narrow down what it is that you're wanting to hear. It's the ability of a receiver to discriminate between multiple signals. So that's, as you can see here, that is going to be controlled by these little doodads right there. I can't make out exactly what those are. Eyes aren't getting any better, but so that is what the selectivity in a radio is. It's the ability to narrow down what it is that you want to hear and get rid of all the extra. Here is an FM radio. As you can tell, it's quite a bit more complicated here. More parts that it goes through, because an FM signal is it's a very wideband signal, and it does not work like AM does. So you have the signal coming in. Eventually, it's got to be limited down, because you're going to have all this stuff coming in, and then the limiter will pass the information over to the discriminator to filter. This is basically does the same thing as in the AM radio. It's going to cut down what it is that you're trying to hear. The identifying characteristics in this is going to be your limiter and your frequency discriminator. So this is what's going to be important in the FM receiver. This is something that you're going to have to memorize. Is in FM receivers, you're going to have a limiter and you're going to have a frequency discriminator, because it may ask you, it may give you this diagram and say, what kind of receiver is this? Well, if you see a limiter and you see a frequency discriminator, you can know that it's an FM receiver. All right, so some interference causes. There are multiple different kinds of interference. There is an overload. Your receiver is just a fundamental overload. The signal that's coming in is so strong on the receiver that it basically causes the receiver to not be able to receive. It's just so powerful that in the radio, in ham radio, you will often hear this referred to as desensitizing, desense. So that's something that you will experience as a ham radio operator if you transmit too close to another radio on the same frequency. Harmonics as you're transmitting, a harmonic is just a natural multiple of the frequency. So if I'm transmitting on, let me just say 200 megahertz, there's going to be a harmonic at 400 megahertz. Now, how well your radio is able to filter that out, basically a better radio will be able to filter out that harmonic. But there will be some harmonics there, just because it's just a multiple. It's like a double and then another double, so it's going to exist. Most radios do a very good job of filtering that out. A spurious emission is an unwanted non-harmonic RF signal. If your radio is starting to have problems, and while you're using it, it just spits out garbage on other frequencies, and it's causing interference, and it's doing weird things. These are unwanted non-harmonic RF signals. They will cause interference, and they can cause it because it's basically your radio is starting to degrade. That's one way you can think about it. The more your radio degrades, say the older it gets, or if it's damaged, it can start giving out spurious emissions, and you have to stop. You have to stop transmitting if somebody says, "Hey, your radio is not functioning properly." So, newer radios, I haven't experienced that. I've got some cheap radios that I have not been generous or not been gentle with. They don't get used anymore because they do produce spurious emissions. And then FM over deviation. What this is, I want you to think of over deviation as, say you have a cup. Let's see, you have a cup of water. You have the ability on most radios to adjust your microphone gain. So you can adjust the sensitivity to how much your microphone can actually hear. It's like turning the volume up, except your microphone is listening and amplifying, essentially. So you have a cup of water, and you pour water into it. You've turned the microphone gain up a little bit. You're about 50%. You can still use the radio. You might start getting some complaints saying your signal is loud. Well, you can pour more water into it. 75%. You still have a little bit more. Once you get to 100%, that's it. Your radio does not have the ability to amplify your microphone signal anymore. But you could probably turn it up, and the actual radio doesn't have it. Now, you could keep turning your microphone gain up to what would be the equivalent of 125%. Your radio is only capable of 100%. So what happens? If you keep filling up a water bottle, eventually it's going to spill over, and you're going to get splatter. And so when that happens, you have to turn your microphone gain down because it's just too high. The radio can't handle that much, so you have to turn it down. Otherwise, it will be the same as if your cup, it's just overflowing and water splattering all over the place. So this right here, this is a mechanical filter. This is similar to like the filter in your air conditioner. It filters actual particles. There are certain particles that it filters out, and some go through. So this is a mechanical filter. You might use this if there's something next to your radio that's causing a lot of problem or causing a lot of interference. You could try some sort of a mechanical or furnace filter. Then you have, excuse me, you have electronic bandpass filters, which combines inductors and capacitors in order to basically filter out what it is that you don't want to hear. In this case, we have three frequencies right there. All three of them are they're interfering with each other. We have this bandpass filter right here that will allow this middle frequency to go through with no problem, and then it will use these inductors and capacitors to filter those out. So multiple signals enter, and only the wanted will exit. You will oftentimes use those on HF in order to kind of filter out. If you have multiple transmitters operating at the same time, you can use a electronic bandpass filter to kind of isolate those multiple transmitters. They're heavily used on what we call field day, because you oftentimes have multiple transmitters that are very close to each other, and they can bleed over pretty bad. So this is something that you would use that for. A notch filter also uses inductors and capacitors, and what it does, multiple signals also will enter. This one is sometimes it's what it does is it does exactly the opposite of a bandpass filter. You have multiple signals coming in. Let's say you're on a radio and somebody's operating very close to you. You want to filter them out. You'll use a notch filter to filter out that center frequency right there, while the other two pass. So that is exactly the opposite of a bandpass, where the bandpass allows, it filters everything but what you want, and then a notch filter will filter out what you don't want and allow everything else to pass. Notch filters are very common on HF radios because you can go in there and you can notch out a certain frequency. If somebody's talking on top of you, you can notch that out to where you do not hear that. They're still there, but you won't hear them because you have filtered them out, and then everything else around can continue to go through. So some of the received interference, radio antenna, a high-low pass filter. Sometimes you can hear your voice in a regular radio. Same thing with a television. Not so much since digital has taken over. If you have a television and receiving an analog signal, and your neighbor says, "I hear all this noise every time you talk. I hear your voice in there." You would use a high or low pass filter to filter yourself out so it doesn't cause interference on their TV. Same thing with the radio. A telephone line, you'll use an RF filter. An RF filter was very common in the days of DSL. You always had to have that RF filter in there because you would get that interference on your telephone line. So these are some of the different kind of filters that you may encounter. Okay. In order to block out some of the radiated interference, like harmonics, you're going to use a low pass filter between the transmitters. So a low pass filter is going to allow the frequency that you want, and then it's going to basically block out I believe a low pass filter will block out higher frequencies in order to get rid of harmonics. Some of the interference that you may experience with your car is if you don't have a good ground, or your car doesn't have a very good ground, you might hear noise from your electrical system. Oftentimes it's a whine that will get higher and lower depending on the RPM of your car. You might hear it in your speaker. You might hear it on the transmitted signal. So what you would do for that was you'd get some sort of a filter. You can get ferrite beads or something along that lines. Make sure that your radio is grounded very thoroughly to a metal stud somewhere that does not it's not painted. That way it gets a good solid ground. So those are some of the different kinds. The most common is that whine. So I haven't really experienced a whine from most modern cars that I've driven, but the old ones where it was just everything was purely mechanical, it wasn't uncommon. So a little review. What could cause your FM signal to interfere with stations on nearby frequencies? It's going to be A, microphone gain too high, causing over deviation. basically a splattering of your sound, and you can actually hear it, and it sounds like a splatter. It's just because too much gain is going into the radio and it can't handle it. What is the source of a high-pitched whine that varies with engine speed in a mobile transceiver's receiver audio? It's going to be the alternator. The faster the RPM, usually the higher the pitch to whine, and you can hear it as the say somebody takes off from a stoplight. You can hear the whine go up and then back down, up and then back down, depending on the speed of the engine. What would cause a broadcast AM or FM radio to receive an amateur radio transmission unintentionally? It's going to be the receiver is unable to reject strong signals outside the AM or FM band. How can overload of a non-amateur radio or TV receiver by an amateur signal be reduced or eliminated? It's going to be A, block the amateur signal with a filter at the antenna input of the receiver. That's if your transmission is causing interference on the TV, on your neighbor's TV. What is the name of a circuit that generates a signal of a desired frequency? That's the thing that actually makes the signal, the RF signal. It's going to be D. That's going to be your oscillator. That's going to be that thing that makes that oscillating, that up and down sine wave radio frequency. Which of the following is used to convert a radio signal from one frequency to another? It's going to be the mixer. Questions or anything? We are done with session 2. We can take some questions. We actually did very well on time tonight. I have a few minutes so we can take some questions if you'd like.
Okay. Sure, yeah. That'd be great.
Let me pull them up here.
Anybody in chat? We have about 98 watching right now. Anybody in the chat have any questions after tonight?
It's a little bit down from last night, but that's not...
Yeah,
that's
Frank...
not uncommon.
No, it's not. Frank had mentioned that earlier, and you know what? All the classes I've ever posted on my channel... It's either like 3 parts or more than that, 3, 4, 5, 6-part class. The first one always gets more views. So either people watch it and they're like, "This is over my head," and they stop, or they're just like, "I'm gonna come back to that later," and they just haven't done it yet. So I don't know what the cause for that is. So, but that's cool. Hey, you know what? This video, as I said before, I'll say it again. This video will be posted to YouTube after the live stream ends. YouTube does an auto process thing on the back end, and it'll be uploaded, and you'll be able to view it as many times as you want to. So just because you didn't catch the live stream, you missed out on the chat. Other than that, you're going to get all the information that was posted here, so it's not a big deal. And you can always ask questions in the comments section of YouTube, and I monitor that pretty closely on my channel. I try to keep up with all the comments on all the videos on my YouTube channel. So if you ask something, I will do my best to answer it.
Somebody asked yesterday about the Kentucky VEC.
Yes.
I didn't get an answer back on that, so I'm still working on it.
Okay. All right. How can you best use the DMR system from Shelby, Kentucky to Fort Worth? Dawson asks that. What I would do is use one of the nationwide talk groups like TAC 310, North America, Brandmeister, USA, something like that, to talk from one state to the other. That's the way I would do it. Hey, Mike Hafner's in the chat.
Mike!
Polarization is covered in antennas in Section 3. Mike Hafner in the chat is the one who put this curriculum together. Everyone give him a thanks in the chat. Really great curriculum tonight.
Thank you, Mike.
And He is working tirelessly on an extra class. And everybody always asks me, where's the extra class? Where's the extra class? Dude, there's like twice as many questions in the extra class as there is in the technician or the general class.
Yeah, I think the technician is 300 questions, somewhere around there. And then the general is 375.
Yeah,
and then
it's just a little bit more.
The extra is like almost 800.
Right. It's crazy. Yeah, Mike says he's been here all along. Okay. Hey, Mike, I missed you if you posted earlier, man. Thanks for watching. Yeah, Mike Hafner in the chat right now. He is the one who wrote this curriculum. Did a fantastic job. It's been given, this curriculum has been updated. How many years have we been given this, Chris? Because it's been updated every 4 years with the new question pool. But
I know I've done this probably eight or nine times.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like the last.
So it's been updated probably that I know of, that I've done it probably 2, maybe 3 times.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like 10, 12 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he works on this. He's very good with the curriculum and putting everything together and making it understandable and giving you guys information that, and this is, again, I said this at the beginning of the video last night. I've got several questions that are like, hey, is this training just going to be like question, answer, question, answer, question, answer? Or is it going to actually explain everything? This curriculum explains everything. That's why it's so long. You can go and get like a KB6NU no-nonsense study guide. There's nothing wrong with that. That's KB6NU, Dan Romanchik. He's a good friend of mine. I talk to him all the time. I meet him at Hamfest. He's a good dude, very knowledgeable, very good in CW Morse code. And he writes a couple of books called No Nonsense Guides that just teaches you the basic information to get your amateur radio license and move on after that. And if that's how you want to do it, more power to you. Go do that. But this test, this curriculum, teaches you the material, explains why the answer is what the answer is, and builds on your knowledge base so that later on you kind of understand what's going on. We actually get on the air and put the HF radio on the antenna, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So, new extra is more than 600 questions, Mike says. Yeah, we were guessing closer to 800. So,
it's a bunch.
Yep. He says tired on the extra class. I don't doubt it. Him. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt it. Dude, Mike, when you get done with that, make Chris teach it. Since you've done all the work, on putting the question together, make Chris teach it, and we will live stream it right here. Because
you want to know what babbling would be?
Oh God! Well, hey, you'll have to go through. We'll have to. I
learned it in order to pass that test, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, we'll have to.
It is.
I'm a general. Frank is a general, and we have both said that as soon as Mike's extra class gets done, we're going to take that class, we're going to record it, we're going to post it. But if we can get it live streamed, that'd be even better. So we're going to be Frank and I are going to be going through the class and testing,
and you're going to be going.
So, yeah. You're like, hey, I need a beer, and that's what I've got right now. So it's all good. It's all good, man. It's all good stuff. Old extra is nearly 800 questions. New is not easier, he says. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think they trimmed out quite a bit of, and then just made what they had actually more potent.
Yeah. We will again the general class. Frank, if you want to post this in the chat again, please. The general class is already on my channel. The same club, the Hearst Amateur Radio Club at w5hrc.org, Whiskey 5 Hotel Romeo Charlie.org. They give a class twice a year, technician and general. They've done that for years and years since I've been here. There you go. Yeah, that's the website. The general class is on my channel in a playlist that Frank will post in the chat here in just a second. Or maybe Noel will do it. One of you guys will do it. So you can go watch the general class, get your technician license, and then go watch the general class. And watch that and take those tests, aa9pw.com. Take those tests when you feel comfortable. Contact your local testing facility, VEC, whoever. Take the general class, and then once you have a general, then start studying for your extra. And yes, we will be doing an extra on this class. I've been asked that question for years. Years and years and years. I put up my first technician class that you guys did, Chris, back in, gosh, 2016?
16, I think it
Something
was.
like that, yeah. And everybody's like, where's the extra? Where's the extra? Where's the extra? Dude, I don't blame them for asking that. I'm asking that myself. Where's the extra? Where's the extra? But it's so much. There's technician, there's general, there's technician and general over here, and there's extra way over here. So
the technician and general are, they're a pretty good close step. I mean,
yeah.
Once you get your technician, there's a little bit more math, a little bit more technical. The general's a little bit more technical.
Yeah.
Then you got the extra. It is.
It's crazy.
It's very technical. A lot of math.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Just probably majority of it, 75-80% of it is math, calculus type math. So it's an intense course. I mean, there's a lot of people who have it, but it's something that you if you can memorize things to take a test, then you can do that. But otherwise, like I had to.
Oh shoot!
I had to
clicked on that.
Yeah, you're
clicked the wrong thing there. So people are asking in the chat, what time is the course tomorrow? We will start at 10 a.m. Central Time. Currently, because of daylight savings, Central Time is UTC -5. So 10 a.m. Central Time tomorrow, we will start. And it'll go, you said, for about 3 hours, Chris?
Oh, it'll probably be about the same as today. A couple hours, maybe two and a half hours.
Or so. Okay.
And then we'll do some questions, and I think people will be probably pretty comfortable. I would, if you have not started already, you need to start taking practice tests. If you have the intention of doing your technician class, you need to start doing. Your tech test. Mm-hmm. You need to start doing practice tests. That's just
correct.
That's just how it is. I mean, it's something that you've got to do. You've got to get yourself comfortable with it, because if you go into it and you have not done any practice tests, you will be overwhelmed, because it's a lot of information, but it's all stuff that we've gone over and we will go over. And so you will know this information as long as you're reading your book, you've gone through this course, and you're doing practice tests. They all go together. You can't just take one and expect to pass. That's not how it works.
Correct. That is correct. Let me share I have a pre-planned event for the extra Godly, I'm getting tongue-tied. The third session of the technician class tomorrow. Let me share the link with you guys in the chat real quick. 1 second. Here it is. And this will tell you what time it is as well. It is 10 a.m. Central Time, not Eastern Time. Somebody asked in the chat, Eastern Time. No, not Eastern, Central Time. Texas Time. It is at that link right there. I just shared it in the chat. And if you miss it, hey, if we want you to be here live, we do, so that you can ask questions. But if you miss it, it'll be replayable afterwards, so it's okay. It's not a big deal. I have to get the book. Where do I find the book? Dan Garcia says, look in the YouTube description of any of these courses, and there's an Amazon link to where the book is for the W5YI technician exam, technician question pool. W5YI is what this curriculum follows. Now, if you have the ARRL book, that's okay. The question pool is the same for everybody. This curriculum follows the W5YI book, but you don't have to have that book, because the question pool is all the same for every book. So just get one that's rated for the year 2020.
Yeah. The Gordon West book is really, really good. You get the answer.
Yeah.
You get the question, you get the answer, and a good description why. And this course follows that book. Like you said, you can use the other books, but this course is not. It's going to follow that Gordon West book,
right?
Where it may not follow the ARRL book. here's this subject. It may be back here.
It might be in a different order, but it's all the same stuff. It's all the same material. So, yeah, good deal. Okay.
Yeah, start doing practice tests. AA9PW is what I would recommend anyway.
Correct. AA9PW.com. Go out there, take a practice test, take 10 practice tests. When you get to the point where you can take a practice test and always get like a 75% or better, you're ready, man. Go take the test like right now. And Frank, if you would please, sir, post the 2 URLs in the chat where people can take online tests. You can go to hamstudy.org/sessions, or you can go to the Anchorage VEC group, and their URL is a little bit tricky. But Frank will post those in chat here in just a second. They've been posted several times tonight already. You can sign up for a test. Those guys are getting overwhelmed right now because there's a lot of people wanting to take amateur radio tests, which is a good thing. Frank or Noel, whoever wants to post that. There's Frank. Okay, so the 2 links that Frank just posted, hamstudy.org/sessions or kl7aa.org/vec/remote-testing. You can go either one of those. Sign up for a test. It might be a week or 2 or 3 out, and that's okay. Sign up for the best time that suits you, and then use that time between now and then to study. AA9PW.com. Take as many practice tests as you can.
Take 1 or 2 a day.
Yeah.
That way you see a random batch of questions every time.
Yeah. So good deal. All right, man. I think we're done here. I don't see any questions coming in except for, where to test, and that's been answered. We will reconvene tomorrow for the 3rd and final session at 10 a.m. Central Time. I shared the link in the chat. There it is again. You can find that out. Go to hamradio2.com/Discord to join our Discord server. Go to hamradio2.com/email-sign-up to sign up for my email list where I share information about all the stuff I'm doing on this channel. New tests, new classes, new radios, new everything. So new hams. Have a new ham workshop series of videos starting on Monday. Monday will be titled, So You Got Your Ham Radio License, Now What? Tuesday will be a guide for what the best amateur radio HT is to buy once you get your license. So, and then sometime the following week, I'll do another video on the best mobile radio, and I'm going to have half a dozen or so videos in the New Ham Workshop playlist on YouTube. So, really good stuff there.
Can I do a shameless plug?
Go ahead.
DMR Texas. You've mentioned it before.
Yes.
This site is run by Jason and I, and it has, if you're in Texas and you want DMR, any kind of information on DMR, this is where you can find it most accurate, most up to date. A lot of time and energy goes into it. We also have some code plugs. It's kind of limited. We haven't had any donations recently, but there's some there, as well as if you're wanting information for another state, there's some information that I've been able to gather. So that is that's the information I was going to tell you about while we were going through that DMR section.
Right. Yeah. Always plug that as much as you can. I've mentioned this website on my channel several times, so it's not a problem at all.
I can always tell when you do because I see there's always a traffic spike.
Nice. I tell people to go out there and click on the National Code Plugs database. Mm-hmm. And if you see something out there that's missing for your state, share it with us. It's always good. Always good. So good. All right, guys, we're going to shut it down. I'm going to play a quick promo for our YouTubers Hamfest really quick, and then the stream will end after that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Smash the like button, the thumbs up underneath the video if you haven't done it already. We will reconvene at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, Central Daylight Time, I should say, tomorrow morning. Saturday. That'll be the last session. And yes, all these videos will post on YouTube afterwards for you to watch anytime you want to. 73, thanks for watching. Chris, thanks for presenting tonight.
My pleasure as always.
I'm going to kick it to the promo video, and then we're going to shut it down. So you guys have a good night. Bummed that Hamvention isn't happening this year?
Yeah, so are we.
Just like you, we were looking forward to seeing all the new radios.
Antennas.
Ham radio toys.
Seeing all the industry folks.
Learning new skills and
getting the latest information on our hobby.
We were also looking forward to seeing other creators.
And having a beer or two.
Or maybe a little crown.
Yeah, we were bummed.
But we came up with an idea.
We're getting together live.
But isolated.
And we want to bring you the latest,
the greatest,
and the largest virtual ham radio show ever attempted.
Ever.
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 On Saturday, May 16th, 2020.
Join all of us YouTubers
as we gather live on each of our channels.
And bring you everything new,
cool,
and amazing in ham radio technology.
Join me.
Join me.
And me.
And
some of these
guys.
All day Saturday.
Along with
all of us.
For the YouTubers Ham Fest.
We'll see you there, okay, guys?